This video is about whether German New Medicine or GNM would be considered a mind-body modality. So if you are coming to this video and you have never heard of German New Medicine or GNM before, then I suggest going over to my longer video in this playlist that is about how to live without fear of illness, and that is a basic explanation of the pillars of GNM. But in this video, I'd like to explore a little bit further how GNM relates to this idea of a mind-body modality. So if you're coming to this, you might be somebody who already really respects and honors the mind-body-spirit connection. You're somebody who already thinks about how our minds and bodies and emotions and spirit are integrated, that we're really a full person and not just these different little segmented silos. And if you're already in that boat, maybe you've already experienced some techniques or modalities that bridge that connection between body and emotions, maybe something like the emotion code or traditional Chinese medicine, and those are all wonderful. You might also have come to this through an awareness of the impact of trauma. There's so much more awareness now with things like the body keeps the score, of this idea that when we have trauma in our lives, then we see a physical impact of that later on. So GNM, essentially I'm going to take 2 points here. One is that it extends and specifies this idea of the mind-body-spirit connection, and also that it flips the script in many ways on the way that we have often been thinking about this connection, in our everyday lives and some of these other modalities that we may have experienced. So GNM is in essence a comprehensive framework and map of the entire body, and it explains how when we experience physical symptoms, those symptoms are the result of a meaningful biological adaptation that has occurred on our brain and organ level as a result of an acutely distressful event in our lives and the way that our psyche or subconscious has interpreted that event. So in GNM, what we see is that when we have an event that has an acutely emotional distressful aspect that catches us off guard and that is isolating to us in the moment, that can be a big or a small event. When that happens, our psyche interprets that event, and that interpretation of our experience initiates a meaningful biological adaptation that affects a specific relay in our brain, a part of the brain, and the corresponding organ to that relay. And that tissue adaptation is meant to help us survive and overcome the way that we have experienced that event. It is a biological mechanism for us to overcome and survive, and therefore it's meaningful to the type of event that we experienced. So with GNM, once you get into it and start learning it, it is a full map of every tissue in the body. And when we start to have a symptom, we can look at that map and say, what symptom am I experiencing and where is it? And based on that, we can work backward and see what is the meaningful biological adaptation that is happening, and then what was the initiating type of event. So it helps us to draw the connection between specific interpretations of events, the way our subconscious has interpreted it, and the symptom. And even more so, that symptom is not random, but it's meaningful from the perspective of helping us to adapt and survive. So I'd like to take that a step further and talk about how GNM essentially flips the script of many of the things that we think about with this mind-body-spirit connection. So especially maybe in relation to thinking about traumatic events where something bad has happened to us, we've had these intense emotional experiences. A lot of us may think of that as then, well, something bad happened to me, and so at some random time later in my life, my body is going to break down because it can't take the emotional weight of this experience and this event. and I don't know when that's coming, and I don't know what's going to happen. And it may feel like it's kind of this terrifying anticipation that something might happen to me and my body might break in an unexpected way. And that symptom is a sign that my body can't take it anymore and that my body is breaking down. GNM really flips that script by saying our bodies are not breaking down. They're actually meaningfully adapting to help us to overcome these situations that we've experienced. Nothing is random, and it's not coming to a random part of our body or at a random occurrence. It's following a specific pattern and a meaningful progression that's actually about strengthening the body in the long run to help us make it through these experiences. So I'll give you a really quick example from everyday life to show how a meaningful biological adaptation can happen in the moment. So let's say you're driving to work and you all of a sudden get a flat tire. Now that could be what we call a conflict shock, or this acutely distressing experience that's unexpected and catches you off guard, and in the moment you are kind of stressed about that. You have to react, you have to get off the road, you have to figure out what to do. You at that moment don't know what part of your body might be adapting, but the way your psyche experiences that event will set in play this meaningful biological program. So one program that may happen there is what we call a stink conflict, or an annoyance or irritation conflict. So think about when you say that stinks, that is really annoying. And that affects the nasal mucosa, or the lining of the nasal passages. And when we experience this type of conflict, while it's still active, while we're dealing with it in the moment, while we are kind of stressed and hyped up and going through that adrenaline, our nasal passages are losing cells. They're widening. And the biological purpose of widening the nasal passages is because in nature, our sense of smell is essential to picking up danger. And so when we have a stink conflict or an annoyance conflict, the biological response is about widening the nasal passages to pick up on that danger so we can better smell it out and sniff it out. You would not be aware that that is happening in your nasal passages, but what you would be aware of is being kind of distressed and upset and trying to deal with this issue. Now, with your flat tire, let's say that you've gotten off the road and now you've called AAA and they're coming and they're going to help you deal with it, and you start to relax, and that would be a resolution. So you've come through the crisis of the conflict being active, you're starting to resolve it. When you go into that resolution, now your body is going to restore the tissue that has changed. So you had lost cells in your nasal passages to make them wider. When you go into a resolution, your body is now restoring those cells to restore the nasal passages back to the way they were. And with that restoration, you get that stuffy nose, that mucus, and you may notice that you have a sudden sneezing fit, and that's expelling the mucus, getting that all out of the way. So one little challenge for you is the next time in the middle of the day that you notice all of a sudden maybe you have a stuffy nose, or you get a runny nose, or you suddenly sneeze a couple of times, think before that, what annoyed me, what irritated me, what stunk in the moment. And you may find something there that your body and your subconscious interpreted as an annoyance conflict, and you went through a very quick process of resolving that. So to me, GNM has really taken the fear out of symptoms by showing us how the mind-body connection is not just random, or we're not somehow breaking down as a result of what we've experienced. Instead, we're adapting, and our bodies are doing this in a meaningful way. Hope this helps, and I'll talk to you soon.